Have you ever heard of a king so disastrous, so utterly unfit to rule, that his own subjects desperately wished he'd never worn the crown? History is littered with them, but today we're diving deep into the story of one of the most infamous. England's King John. Forget the misunderstood villain from the Robin Hood tales. The real story is far more shocking. How did one man manage to lose a continental empire, get excommunicated by the Pope, and provoke his own barons into a full-scale rebellion, all in one reign? Stick around, because this is the incredible true story of the king who should have never been crowned. John wasn't even supposed to be king. He was the youngest of 5 sons of the legendary Henry II and Eleanor of Aquitaine. His father famously nicknamed him John Lackland because, unlike his older brothers, he wasn't given any significant territory to rule. He was the spare, the afterthought. His older brothers, Henry, Richard, and Geoffrey, were all groomed for power. They were warriors, politicians, and the designated heirs to the vast Angevin Empire, which stretched from the Scottish border all the way to the Pyrenees Mountains in Spain. John, on the other hand, was left in the shadows, growing up with a massive chip on his shoulder. This sense of inadequacy fueled a treacherous ambition. While his most famous brother, Richard the Lionheart, was away on the Third Crusade, John saw his chance. He betrayed his own brother, plotting with King Philip of France to seize the English throne. He spread rumors that Richard was dead and tried to bribe his way into power. Can you imagine the audacity? Your brother is off fighting for Christendom, and you're at home trying to steal his kingdom. The plot failed spectacularly when Richard, against all odds, made it back to England. Richard, being surprisingly merciful, forgave his younger brother, famously saying he is only a child who has had evil counselors, but this child had shown his true colors. The seeds of mistrust were sown, and the stage was set for a truly calamitous reign. Then, the unthinkable happened. Richard the Lionheart, the celebrated warrior king, died from a crossbow wound in 1199. Suddenly, John Lackland was no longer landless. He was King John of England, but he inherited a throne with a rival claimant, his own nephew, Arthur of Brittany, the son of his deceased older brother Geoffrey. According to the customs of the time, Arthur arguably had a better claim. This rivalry would lead to one of the darkest and most mysterious episodes of John's reign. In the ensuing war, John captured the young Arthur, and then Arthur simply vanished. The most widely accepted account is that John, in a drunken rage, murdered his own nephew with his own hands and dumped his body in the River Seine. Whether this is entirely true or not, the disappearance of a legitimate heir under his watch permanently stained his reputation. It was a sign of the ruthlessness and paranoia that would define his rule. With his rival gone, you'd think John might settle down. You would be wrong. His next opponent was one of the most powerful men in the world, Pope Innocent III. The dispute started over who should be the next Archbishop of Canterbury. John wanted his guy, the Pope wanted his. When John refused to accept the Pope's choice, Innocent III placed all of England under an interdict. This was a spiritual lockdown. No church services, no baptisms, no Christian burials. For the deeply religious people of medieval England, this was terrifying. They believed their very souls were in peril. John, however, just doubled down. He seized church lands and pocketed the revenues. The Pope's response: he excommunicated King John personally. This was the medieval equivalent of being canceled by the entire Christian world. It was a political disaster, effectively declaring him an illegitimate ruler in the eyes of God and man, giving his enemies, both at home and abroad, the perfect excuse to move against him. While John was busy fighting the Pope, he was also proving to be a military catastrophe. His father, Henry II, and his brother, Richard, were brilliant military commanders who built and defended a massive empire in France. John, on the other hand, was about to lose it all. King Philip of France, the same man John had conspired with against Richard, saw his opportunity. He systematically attacked John's territories in Normandy, Anjou, and Maine. John's campaigns to defend them were disorganized, underfunded, and ultimately disastrous. His nickname, Lackland, became a bitter prophecy. He also earned a new, less than flattering nickname from his enemies, Softsword, a direct jab at his perceived military incompetence compared to the legendary Lionheart. By 1204, he had lost Normandy, the ancestral heartland of the English monarchy. An empire that had taken generations to build was lost in just a few short years. How did he pay for these failed wars and his extravagant lifestyle? By taxing his people into oblivion. John was relentlessly creative when it came to inventing new fees and fines. He squeezed his barons for every penny they had, using a brutal system of fines and feudal dues. If a baron died, his heir had to pay an enormous relief fee to inherit the land. He would take noble children as hostages to ensure their parents' good behavior. This constant financial pressure, combined with his military failures and his tyrannical, unpredictable behavior, pushed the English barons to the breaking point. They weren't just angry, they were terrified. They saw a king who respected no law, no tradition, and no right but his own. They realized that if they didn't act, he would ruin them all. This simmering resentment finally boiled over. In 1215, the exasperated barons of England renounced their allegiance to John and marched on London. Facing a full-blown civil war and with his back against the wall, John was forced to negotiate. On a meadow at Runnymede, he was presented with a document, a list of demands from his rebellious subjects. He had no choice but to affix his royal seal to it. This document was the Magna Carta, the Great Charter. It wasn't a declaration of rights for all people, not yet, but it was a revolutionary first step. For the first time, it established the principle that everybody, including the king, was subject to the law. It declared that no free man could be imprisoned or have his property seized without due process. It was a direct response to John's tyranny. But here's the twist. John had absolutely no intention of honoring it. As soon as the barons dispersed, he wrote to the Pope, with whom he had since reconciled, and had the Magna Carta declared null and void. He called it illegal and unjust, a document forced upon him by traitors. This betrayal immediately plunged England into a brutal civil war, known as the First Barons' War. The rebel barons were so desperate to get rid of John that they took the extraordinary step of inviting the French prince, Louis, to invade England and take the throne. That's how bad it was. They preferred a foreign invader to their own king. John's final year was a chaotic mess of marching and counter-marching across a war-torn country. In one final, fittingly disastrous moment, he famously lost his entire baggage train, including the crown jewels, to the incoming tide while crossing an estuary called the Wash. Imagine losing the nation's most precious treasures in a muddy swamp. A few days later, exhausted, sick with dysentery, and defeated in spirit, King John died. His death, ironically, was the best thing that could have happened for the kingdom. With the hated king gone, the English barons lost their main reason for rebellion. They quickly abandoned the French prince and rallied around John's 9-year-old son, Henry III. So, was John truly the worst king England ever had? He was treacherous, murderous, militarily incompetent, and tyrannical. He lost a continental empire, provoked a civil war, and was so despised that his subjects tried to replace him with a foreign prince. Yet, out of the ashes of his disastrous reign came one of the most important documents in the history of democracy, the Magna Carta. Its principles that a ruler is not above the law, and that citizens have basic rights echo down the centuries, influencing constitutions and legal systems around the globe, including the U.S. Constitution. So in a strange, ironic twist of fate, The king who should have never been crowned inadvertently laid the groundwork for the very freedoms that would prevent a ruler like him from ever holding such absolute power again. What do you think? Is there another monarch in history who was even more of a disaster than King John? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Thanks so much for watching, and if you enjoyed this journey into the past, don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe for more incredible stories from history. We'll see you in the next one.